Okay, that's probably it for Pedro Martinez. Not a bad outing at all. Bullpen just needs to hold this lead, and the Boston Red Sox will be American League champions. Wow. Oh, they're leaving Pedro out there for the 8th inning. Well, that's not good. Time to pull him. Bullpen time. Make the call. Make the call. They're still leaving him out there? What is Grady Little thinking? Oh, please, Pedro, just get out of this and... oh, no. Red Sox manager Grady Little's decision to leave Pedro Martinez on the mound in Game 7 of the 2003 ALCS was a big, big deal. This video is presented by T-Mobile, now the best network in America according to Ookla Speed Test. Go to T-Mobile.com/network to see how. In Game 7 of the 2003 ALCS, the Red Sox had their hated rival, the New York Yankees, on the ropes. Boston held a 5-2 lead entering the bottom of the 8th inning. 6 more outs, and the Sox would advance to the World Series. Just one problem. Boston's ace righty, Pedro Martinez, one of the most dominant pitchers in the history of baseball, was starting to wobble a little bit at the end of a strong outing. Martinez had just given up a home run in the 7th inning and had thrown exactly 100 pitches. The heart of the Yankees' order was due up. This was Red Sox manager Grady Little's problem to solve. Managing a potential pitching change in the late innings of an ALCS Game 7 would be a high-stakes proposition no matter what, but history hinged on this particular decision. Boston hadn't been to the World Series since 1986. They hadn't won a World Series since 1918. They had never been closer to cracking the notorious curse of the Bambino, a long and miserable parade of mistakes and misfortune. If the Red Sox mishandled their pitching situation, they risked handing Game 7 back to the Yankees. Not only their historic rival, but the smug, big-money, evil empire bully of all Major League Baseball. Since Boston's last AL pennant, New York had won 5, punctuating 4 of those runs with World Series trophies. Incidentally, over in the National League, the Chicago Cubs had witnessed a bizarre, harrowing extension of their own curse just days prior. That only intensified the desperation for Sox fans. With a worn-down ace and all that at stake, Little had a few options. Option 1, pull Pedro Martinez off the mound and bring in someone from the bullpen. Option 2, let Pedro keep pitching. And of course, number 3, cry. Crying is always an option and often the best one. Pedro himself believed his manager would go with option 1, and he had company in that belief. Boston's trainer believed Martinez was fatigued because he had said as much. Boston's lead executives, watching from the stands, believed their bullpen was up for the task of getting 6 high-stakes outs on the road. And within that bullpen, Boston's pitching coach believed he had a lefty, Alan Embry, ready to face the next batter in New York's lineup, left-handed Nick Johnson. The stats actually disagreed with that last thing, though, so it wasn't that big a surprise when Martinez returned for the bottom of the 8th to face Johnson. Pedro got him out. Cool. No harm done. Score unchanged. 5 outs needed. Same problem as before, only a little more pronounced. Pedro's pitch count now stood at 107, firmly in the territory where stats showed his effectiveness dropped from legendary to ordinary. The math said to take option 1. Still, Little left Martinez out there to face Derek Jeter. Pedro got himself an 0-2 count, but left his third pitch a little low, allowing Jeter to drill it into right field. Trot Nixon maybe could have made a play out there, but got a bad jump on it and ended up flailing at a ball over his head. Tiny moments like that one can make or break a bold decision. Pedro himself has recounted a time he stayed on the mound way longer than anyone expected, Game 5 of the '99 ALDS versus Cleveland, and pitched near perfectly. It was a super risky move, perhaps not the sensible choice, but Pedro rose to the occasion. But just as easily, a single brain fart or errant blade of grass could have made that decision in '99 look stupid. During this very 2003 playoff run, Grady Little had faced a similar situation with Martinez. He decided to leave Pedro on the mound with a lead in the 8th inning, then watched Martinez give up 2 hits in a run. Little pulled Pedro mid-inning, then his bullpen cleaned up the mess, and Boston advanced to face the Yankees. That decision was overshadowed in history because Boston won anyway. The point is, in this Game 7 against New York, you could tweak one tiny little variable but leave everything else the same and get a different historic result. If Nixon got a perfect jump off Jeter's bat, maybe he would make a great catch and there would be 2 outs and everything else thereafter would have gone differently. But he didn't, and the combination of well-hit ball and defensive miscue were not enough for Little to lose faith in Martinez. One hit didn't change his mind, neither would a high pitch count. Pedro was his man, more than anyone in the bullpen. Little trusted Pedro's stuff, which, to be fair, still had a lot going for it. Several Yankees later said they didn't feel like Martinez was slipping, and Pedro's fastest pitch of the night was his very last one. Nevertheless, the Yankees were getting to him. The next batter, Bernie Williams, had no problem driving Jeter in with a single to center, tightening the score to 5-3. So after a few batters, this decision was not looking like a sage roll of the dice. It was looking like a disastrous example of gut instinct over empirical reason. But here's a question. Whose decision was it? Hideki Matsui was the next batter, a lefty. Southpaw Alan Embry remained available in the bullpen, ready for that matchup. Option 1 was screaming in Grady Little's face. But this time around, Little strolled out to the mound and put the option in his ace's hands. He asked Martinez if he had enough to face Matsui. Basically, no one blames Pedro for his response. His shoulder was hurting, but a proud pitcher would never back down. Asked if he can retire a particular adversary, a pitcher would never say no. Pedro considered it his job to say yes, and Grady Little had to know this about his ace, but he asked anyway. So yeah, Little returned to the dugout without a pitching change. Martinez would face Matsui. Again, Pedro got ahead in the count. Again, Pedro picked a spot, missed it by a little, and got punished for it. Still 1 out, still a 5-3 game, men on second and third. And now, Grady Little's decision, albeit with some input from Pedro Martinez, had kind of gotten away from him. The next batter was Jorge Posada. And if you were going to let a worn-down Pedro face all those previous batters, you had to let him face Posada. They had been going at each other all series, with Posada allegedly saying something about Pedro's mother and Pedro mocking Posada's ears. Martinez also had a pretty strong track record pitching to Posada, so here he went against yet another Yankee batter. Yet again, Pedro pitched himself into a favorable count, and when Posada made contact, it was just a little boink off the narrow part of the bat. For a moment, Grady Little's decision to leave Pedro on the mound all this time still seemed survivable. Yes, everyone was already appalled. Yes, the lead had already dwindled, but this looked like a weakly hit, catchable ball that would create the second out of the frame and hold both runners. The inning looked salvageable. The above could all be forgotten. Here again we see the margins of fate. Plop! The ball dropped plumb in between 3 Boston fielders. Williams and Matsui scored. The game was tied. Only then did Little pull Martinez, pressing the option 1 button way too late. Option 3 looked more appropriate than ever. Embry and Mike Timlin pitched excellently to stop the bleeding, but in extra innings, Tim Wakefield surrendered one of the most famous walk-off home runs in baseball history to Aaron Boone. The Yankees advanced to the World Series while Boston mourned yet another harrowing playoff outcome. The curse continued. So many Red Sox failures in their prolonged title drought felt like cruel twists of fate. But if you reopen them, you can sometimes find a decision preceding the botched execution. Like before Bill Buckner made his infamous through-the-legs error in the 1986 World Series, Sox manager John McNamara had left him in the game when many thought the logical move was to use a pinch hitter. Little had done something similar. He defied logic, dismayed every single interested party, and trusted his gut. Cruel twists of fate just finished the job. Some Boston media took a moment to appreciate all those marginal variables, all the what-ifs that could have mitigated the disastrous outcome of Little's decision. Also, he was one of the most successful managers in franchise history up to that point. But what Red Sox management wanted was calculation, in the truest sense of the word. Long before that fateful Game 7, observers had the sense that Red Sox management was souring on Little because of his tendency to manage from the gut, to neglect the bevy of situational planning and mathematical analysis available to him. And that was the headline when Little lost his job a couple weeks after Game 7. Grady Little, they say, did not get fired because he decided to leave Pedro in the game, but that decision epitomized the reason Boston fired him. Management insisted they neither wanted to be a stats geek organization nor a salty dog traditionalist organization, but it was clear which side of that spectrum they felt Little represented. So, Little's decision became a major part of his legacy. When he was hired for his next job, manager of the LA Dodgers, it was all people wanted to talk about. And then when Little fell out with Dodgers management and resigned less than 2 years later, that decision remained part of every news story. And since we're here to talk about decisions, we cannot neglect the outcome of Boston's decision to fire Little. The Red Sox hired Terry Francona, and a year after Little's club melted down, the 2004 Sox made a legendary ALCS comeback against the Yankees, advanced to the World Series, and finally fully broke their franchise curse. There was another batch of high-stakes decisions, some of which probably defied reason, some of which resulted in super close calls. If any of these little things broke differently, if you tweaked any of these tiny variables, the 2004 Red Sox might have collapsed and broken hearts just like they did the prior year. But they didn't, and they didn't. That's how it goes with big deal decisions. You flip a switch one way or the other, and fate determines the rest. Thanks for watching this episode of Big Deal. If you want to see more stuff like this without any ads, then join these people in subscribing to Secret Base on Patreon. They get that, and they get a lot of other exclusive stuff like podcasts and videos that you won't find elsewhere. But if you're going to stick to YouTube, that's cool too. Just don't forget to like and subscribe.